Welcome to Next of Kin, the Parents Podcast. I'm your host, Emma. I'm a British expat living in Dubai, UAE, with my partner and baby girl. Join me on my expat motherhood journey. I'll be discussing different topics each week and we'll be joined by some wonderful guests. Now, if you're a mum, you're short on time, so let's jump right in. This week, we're digging into relationships with expert Leilani from Wildflower Family Coaching. The topic of, I guess, the change in dynamic after having a baby between you and your partner has been requested a lot of times, and I wasn't really sure how to broach it because I'm really no expert. But then I remembered the wonderful Leilani, who definitely is an expert, and she's also pretty real, and that's really important to me. The last thing I want for any of these podcast episodes, especially the guest episodes, is for them to become preachy and make us feel rubbish. Let's be honest, we all have enough on our plates already and we're trying our best, but I haven't spoken to anyone whose relationship or marriage has just stayed the same. In fact, in the fog and chaos of family life, you need to keep that relationship solid and be a partnership, but it can be so hard to prioritise. So what I'm hoping for today is an honest chat and some tips that we can pick up along the way, or just a bit of encouragement. I also have a small following of blokes on the podcast, so shout out to the dads. Hopefully this one's for you. We did want to get a dad on to record with us, but the timings were difficult. I guess there's always room for that in a future episode, but getting a woman's perspective might not be a bad thing. If you've got a pregnant or a postpartum wife right now going through a lot, then this should be useful. Anyway, I'm sure you're going to love Leilani. She's so knowledgeable, also super accessible. She does these $10 Tuesdays, which are sessions that literally cost $10. And her Instagram has lots of little snippets of advice and reminders. So go and follow at wildflower.family.coaching. On the Next of Kin front, I will actually be launching the brand soon. So I have so much to catch you up on, but I'll save that all for a solo episode. It's been a lot. Oh my God. Anyway, do head over to nextofkin.ae and you can sign up to my mailing list so that you'll be the first to hear about the launch. And of course, I'll give you a sneaky little discount. Right, on with the show. Leilani, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Just getting into school routine, so the exhaustion's starting to wear off a bit.
Okay, how long have they been back for now? About 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, about a month now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're getting into routine.
Yeah, we're trying.
And then it'll be October half term, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then we'll have to do it all over again.
So how has your weekend been? We're recording this on a Tuesday.
Yeah, it's been pretty good. I actually, my husband's been quite busy, so I've been quite happy to let him take the lead on the weekends. And I got a nap in, I slept in. I like to sleep, if you can't tell. So it was pretty relaxing. Although we did have 2 birthday parties. Our social life now is basically just kids' birthday parties every single weekend.
Okay, this is what I've got to look forward to because I see it all over my Instagram. People just saying they've got like 2 parties a weekend at the moment.
Yep. Sometimes 2 a days. Like it's a lot. And if you're an extrovert, like maybe you don't mind it. For me, I'm like completely sensory overload.
Yeah, no wonder you need a nap.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's good. It's nice to see the kids play and enjoy each other. And it's all in good fun. So
yeah, well, I'm just getting excited now for it to be October, and I don't want to be a typical Brit, but the weather. Just walking across here to the studio this morning, I was like, oh wow, it is actually nearly autumn. We're going to be able to have so much fun.
Yeah, it's getting better, I think. There's a little breeze in the morning, and I prefer this extreme weather compared to rainy and dark, England. But even still, I'm ready for it to cool down a bit, for sure.
Because you lived in London before moving over to Dubai, so we've got that in common. We both lived in London.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and both my kids were born there as well, so I have some Brits in my household, kind of, also. Yeah.
How was your experience of giving birth in the UK in London?
Oh, I loved it. When we moved abroad, it was only supposed to be for 1 year.
Yeah. And
turned into 4 years. And we never planned to have children abroad or in London or any of that. But I feel actually really, really fortunate that that's kind of the path that unfolded. I know a lot of people have things to say about the NHS or whatever, but I felt really fortunate. We had a really smooth, really lovely, midwife-led births and a home birth for my second. And yeah, I was really fortunate that that's what ended up happening in our story.
I'm glad. We'll get around to you and your motherhood story then, but let's jump in. So for the listeners, I'm not going to go into the 5 quickfire questions that we know are never quickfire, because I think we can go off on so many tangents today. So I don't really have many questions planned or anything, but this is going to be a whole episode around relationships. And when I say relationships, I'm thinking traditional, like marriage. I mean, I'm not married, so we'll probably use the terms like husband and wife, but you can just adjust that for whatever setup that you've got going on. We're going to talk about how that changes, I guess, during pregnancy, childbirth, that postpartum time, because I read somewhere that 2/3 is it 2/3? Maybe I read this on your Instagram page.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That 2/3 of couples experience a loss in...
Yeah, just a significant drop in relationship quality. A research study with the Gottmans, who are kind of like the head of the field, found that 2/3 of the people that they researched kind of long term were really struggling in their relationship and experienced a big relationship quality drop after having children.
And a lot of people asked me to do an episode on this, but I really didn't even know where to start. Obviously, I'm in the midst of this right now, so it's really hard for me from a subjective point of view.
Yeah.
But it did lead me to having some really good conversations with the dads, because I want the dads to be really included on this episode. And I just asked for their experience and also questions that they would like to know. I mean, the first thing that most of them said when I asked for a question for you was, so what makes her an expert? Is she just like a really good wife? So why don't you introduce yourself and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. I wish that was the answer and that I was coming to you all as a relationship coach and family coach, because my life was perfect and all my relationships were perfect. And actually, it is, far from the truth. If anything, that's my number one kind of imposter syndrome, is that, oh my gosh, relationships are hard and I'm still figuring it. I'm still on this journey as well. It's a lifelong journey, really. But my background actually is in marriage and family counseling. So I'm trained to work with families, to work with couples, to work with parents, to really just have peaceful homes and to not to have relationships that don't have conflict, but rather to be able to cope with the conflict and heal from it and move forward to have functional and really effective and enjoyable relationships, whether that's with your partner or your kids or just the whole family.
Yeah, so you don't just focus on like the husband-wife relationship, but the whole family, right?
Right, exactly. So I come from a structural family therapy perspective. And so I take bits of that. And really what that means is just that we see the family as a system, right? Like your relationship with your partner, now that you have bonding, doesn't exist within a bubble. It exists with your child as a part of it. When you are with each other, you have the dynamic with your partner, but you also have the dynamic with your child. You have the dynamic as the three of you. Your husband has a dynamic your partner has a dynamic with your daughter, right? So our relationships don't exist in bubbles, and we need to take really the whole family system into perspective to understand when maybe things aren't going the way that we want them to.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so did you train and practice before having a family yourself?
Yeah, I did. So I've worked in school settings, not planned, but really with a lot of teenage girls. So I've done that. I've worked in people's homes. I've worked in kind of a private practice setting. In moving to London, I moved for my partner's job. He's a teacher. And so I did some school counseling there. But really when I had children myself and when we were kind of on this expat path, I realized that I wanted to have more of a kind of holistic perspective and be able to work with more people and not so much with just mental health, which is really what the difference is for me majorly between, say, counseling and therapy and coaching. And I didn't want to work with, mental health or provide diagnoses. I wanted to work with people on their everyday problems. And so, yeah, that's where I am now.
That's why I was going to ask you the difference actually between coaching and counseling. But I guess you have a really good background when you're doing your coaching work, if you can pull on that counseling experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so many of the skills and, counselors and all the different versions of that. Psychiatrists will tell you different things. But for me, it's very similar support work. There are some differences, obviously, and sometimes I'm more direct with the people I work with, whereas a counselor might sit back a bit more. And obviously, counselors don't often share their personal experience as much. So if I were a counselor, I wouldn't share my children's faces or my own partner's story quite as much as I do as a coach. And for me, that's really the main difference, is there's a little bit more transparency in how I live my life, and also the imperfections that lie in that I'm certainly not the perfect wife or the perfect mother. And I'm sure my family would attest to that pretty quickly.
But that's why I wanted to have you on, because you're very accessible and you're also very relatable. So on your Instagram, you'll share experiences that we all have as mums, or just generally as people. We all have these same experiences. I like actually when you say that you're going through a difficult maybe emotion at that point and you're trying to decide how to deal with something, because that really resonates with me. And actually that's a question I want to ask you about. It brings me back to pregnancy. So for a lot of the dads that I spoke to, there are a few feelings that came up during pregnancy. One is the helplessness, obviously, because they're not the ones carrying the baby, and it can be quite difficult to, not as difficult as having the baby, guys, but let's leave that debate for now. But for a dad, that is quite difficult. The other thing was that they're probably dealing with a partner who's changed a little bit. I'll just use my own experience. In terms of the hormones, I suddenly didn't have a filter. So I could not.
That sounds great.
Yeah, lucky rich. But if he did something very small that might have annoyed me, I couldn't rationalize and think that maybe we shouldn't start an argument over that tiny thing. Mm-hmm. So he had to deal with that. Do you notice these sort of problems coming up for the dad, pregnancy
absolutely.
And beyond?
I think that, especially for the dads, and I want to preface this by saying I focus on this now because I'm a little bit past it and I can see the bigger picture. I could not see this as easily when I was in that situation or just day to day. But I think that it's, in general, and especially when it's starting in pregnancy, we need to remember that it's a journey for the dads as well. They are also bringing a being into the world. And while they're not having the same experience as the mothers, they're not carrying the child necessarily or, doing the same things. It's a transformation for them also. And actually, I think in some ways, it is a little bit more challenging because they're going through this transformation. They know something is coming, but they have zero control over it. They have zero, it's all just conceptual, right? For the moms, we're like, oh, my belly is starting to grow. I'm experiencing these different emotions. I am walking different, or, it's very
like physical
and like palpable what these changes are. And we can attach meaning to that transformation. Whereas for men, they're like, I'm told that I have a baby coming, right?
Yeah, and they can just go on with their life as normal pretty much, whereas we have this big bump and we have the hormones, so our every thought is about a baby when you're pregnant.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that can also create conflict just because moms can be kind of upset by that. Well, you get to still live your life and my life is already different. And at the same time, we can really build empathy there because like they're trying to adjust, probably. They're trying to like alter their life, but it isn't real to them yet.
Yeah.
And even when the baby is born, the baby is bonding with mom primarily. And so it's really not real when I say real, like I just mean it's not forcing them to transform in the same ways that it is for moms. And that's challenging.
So from the mum's perspective, from the wife's perspective then, she, I guess, needs to understand and give a bit of grace to the partner. There's also the hormones at play, so that's not the easiest to do during pregnancy, but also postpartum, there's a lot going on hormonally. And I'm thinking as well about the newborn phase. I said in episode 15 with Farah that in the newborn phase, felt loads and loads of love for Rich, and we felt really strong and great, and I was really grateful. But then it was about the 3 to 4 months postpartum. So I imagine that those hormones carry you through. I don't know if this isn't a universal experience, but I imagine there's lots of hormones carrying you through that newborn phase, and then probably a dip around the 3 and 4 month phase. Because a lot of people I've spoken to said that was the point
where they started to feel a bit more resentment because their partner is going off and having a shower even, or just going off to the gym, or they can seemingly get on with their lives. Do you, in your professional experience, have see that a lot with your clients?
Yeah, and I don't know if you've ever seen that little graph of going on, but I think it's a really common experience where we kind of go through these kind of peaks and dips when it comes to the relationship. And 3 to 4 months in, reality has kind of set in, like the honeymoon stage is over, even with having a child, especially if it's your first, right? It's like, it's very exciting. It's a huge transformation. You're so, enthralled maybe or whatever, but you're just getting used to it. And then once routine has set in a bit, once reality has set in a bit, and also once the tiredness and the exhaustion has really caught up, we're much more likely to kind of see that resentment. The haze is kind of gone, and we're like, wait a second, like I've really put in this work, this 3 to 4 months, and you have more freedom. And I think, with the pregnancy thing and even postpartum, anytime, even with older children as well, the biggest thing is the communication there, right? Because the partner, we're making kind of some broad generalizations about what many people experience, what many men experience, what many women experience. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be everyone's experience. So you're not going to know what's going on for your partner unless you're really having conversations about it. And those might be like hormone-driven conversations, and they might be, full of emotion. But at the end of the day, we're not going to know what our partner is experiencing, and we're not going to be able to build that empathy unless we're checking in and having those conversations.
And whether it's hormone driven or not, it is their reality at that point.
Exactly.
So you have to take it just as seriously. I think that's a good point, because as a guy, you are going to have to take some, you might not, but I'm only talking from my very hormonal experience. But Rich obviously had to take me very seriously at times where it might not have been so easy to take me seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And on both sides, like our partner's experience, we're not always going to relate to. We're not always going to understand. We're going to think some of it is, like ridiculous.
Yeah.
But the more that we can try and relate to just their feelings behind it, or like, okay, they're overwhelmed. Yeah. I can understand that. Cool. We can talk about that.
Let's go back to what we were saying as well about pregnancy and how it's very palpable and physical for the woman. But how can we really get like the dads involved at that stage and for them to start feeling connected to the baby? Or should we just accept that might, in a lot of cases, take a while?
I think both. I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think it's absolutely both. And it's going to depend on the couple kind of dynamic and relationship and temperaments as well. Involving your partner, obviously, is great. Like, when you feel the baby kick, going to appointments, choosing names, like all of this fun stuff is really nice to involve your partner in. And also not taking it so like an indication of a bad relationship if your partner is not interested in that. Okay. It really makes me think of kind of if you ever, for people who have planned an elaborate wedding, and they're like, well, my partner doesn't care about the tablecloth that we have. And, that's really hurtful because this is a big deal to me and I want it to look perfect. And this really what the partner is saying is, this wedding and our marriage is a big deal to me. And by you not caring about the tablecloths, you must not care about our upcoming union, right? Which is not the case necessarily. It might be, but there's also a chance that your partner just doesn't care about tablecloths. It's not their thing, and like that's okay. And how can they, if you're feeling a little bit insecure about that, how can they show that they're really looking forward to the wedding, really committed to the union in another way that's not talking about every single minute detail of the wedding. That's I think that's a common one, but it's similar, I think, even with baby stuff. Your partner might not care as much about your coming home outfit. Yeah. I mean, I spent hours like, what should I wear? And what kind of robe matches the baby's, I don't know, whatever. But like, my partner might really care about that. That's a nice way to involve them in kind of the prep for baby. Or my partner might be like, I don't know, they all look the same to me. Yeah. And that's not necessarily like, they might not want to be involved in that way, and that's okay also. So really, again, it comes down to having the communication in your partnership to find out what makes you feel involved. What are you interested in? What makes you feel connected to me and the child that I'm growing? Like what is important to you? What's your love language in this scenario? Rather than assuming like what's important to me is going to be important to my partner, and this is how they need to be connected.
Let's talk about love languages, because when I last heard you speak, you did touch on love languages, and you also mentioned that you didn't particularly love using love languages. How useful are they? Because I feel like that's such a buzz thing at the moment, is discussing love languages.
Yeah, I mean, I think it, again, depends on the couple and the couple's temperaments, but I think they're really useful information to have. You know, like it's helpful to know what your partner likes, but it's not going to be as helpful as knowing how to communicate to your partner your needs.
Okay.
You know, so like my partner can know that I love quality time, but it's not my partner's job to memorize all these things about me and put it into place. Okay. What's more important for long-term relationship, right, is yes, for my partner to maybe kind of remember that, but also for me to communicate my needs to my partner.
Yeah.
So it's information. It's information for you to have. It's information for your partner to have. But at the end of the day, I need to be able to communicate to my partner, like, I'm feeling like I know my love language is quality time. I'm feeling disconnected from my partner, rather than relying on my partner to be like, oh, you look down. Oh, that's right. Your love language is quality time. Oh, what can I do to fill that? Which they might, and that would be fantastic. But more important is for me to know that information about myself, to be able to touch in with myself and say, hey, like I'm feeling disconnected right now. Hey, partner, can we get dinner soon?
So what you're really saying is that your emotions and your feelings and everything, that's your responsibility still. So although it's nice to know about the other person, you can't then expect them to turn into a psychic and know exactly what you're thinking.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the love languages are great, as with any kind of personality or whatever assessment. They're nice information to have, but at the end of the day, it's how you're using that information.
Yeah.
For yourself and for the relationship, that's going to be the most important.
Do you know what's funny is that me and Rich both did the quiz to find out our love languages like years ago, and we both got equal on everything except for gift giving. So we were like, oh great, we both have 4 love languages each. Like, not high maintenance at all. Yeah. So for us, probably not as useful with the love languages.
Yeah, right. And so that's exactly the case, right, where it's going to be more helpful for you to be in touch with what your needs are in that moment and to be able to communicate it with your partner.
Yeah. And do love languages change as well? Because I'm thinking back then I got equal across loads of things, but that would include touch. And we've been talking this morning, but I'm very touched out at the moment with Bonnie being very clingy and the breastfeeding and everything. And so that love language is probably completely dropped for me. I do not need any more touch. So does this change through the years and the different phases?
Yeah, you know, I don't know about from the actual authors and researchers behind this what they would say to that. But in my opinion, I would say absolutely, right? We change in general so much after children. We change as we age. You know, like my partner and I met 13 years ago, and we have had multiple different versions of ourselves between then and now that we've had to adjust to and get to know and learn about each other. And I would say that love languages are just the same as that we're evolving, and something we liked before we don't like so much, or maybe we don't like it right now in this phase of our life.
Is there a way to ensure that you grow together instead of apart during all these different phases? Because obviously you're right, after you have a baby, especially for the mother, you turn into a completely different person in a lot of cases. So how do you really ensure that you're growing together and not apart?
I think one of the biggest things is not staying so glued to the idea that you have of the person in your head. Okay. So what I mean by that is not being like, you're not who you used to be and I need you to go back to that.
Yeah.
Or not thinking that they're the same person that they were, especially pre-kids.
Yeah.
And that's for the good and the bad stuff, right? So people change, and we need to constantly be curious about who they are right now, what their preferences are, how they've grown. And this really goes for like the challenges in your relationship as well. We often tell stories, you know, to ourselves. Well, so, you know, my partner is horrible at organization. Yeah. Well, if you keep having this story in your head that they're horrible about, you know, with organization, but they've actually improved hugely but you still have this story in your head, guess what you're going to see?
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to see this new version of them that actually is quite organized. You're going to focus on the little times that they maybe aren't, a few moments, rather than seeing all their growth.
Yeah.
And I think that's especially important after we have children, because we so often, I mean, it rocks our world so entirely that a lot of times we are desperately trying to go back to what was and find ourselves and who we used to be and what our relationship used to be like and what our partner used to be like, but it's not there anymore. And so I think with that, really just mourning, if you need to, if that's been a hard transition, mourning who that person used to be that is no longer there, mourning what the relationship used to be like, because it's not going to go back to how it was. You're not going to become the person that you were before kids, and your partner isn't either, because you've had this amazing but crazy life transition and you're a new person. So really just being curious through each stage about what, you know, who your partner is right now.
Yeah, so giving them space to grow. I think it's interesting to me what you're saying, because I've not necessarily found that with my current relationship, but I've found with friendships where people still expected you to be the person that you were at school, and you're like in your late 20s and have grown so much, and they expect you to react and act a certain way or have an idea in your head. I've definitely seen quite a few different people's friendship groups fall out because of that, because they're not all, they're all growing, but they've still got the same idea of each other.
And what you're saying as well, like sometimes you do grow and evolve and you love the new person or the, you know, who they've kind of grown to be. And sometimes there are parts, maybe really big parts, that you're not loving as much or you don't vibe with as much. And that's kind of a part of it, right? That we have to mourn constantly. And it's the same with children as well. We have to mourn, you know, what we loved about them before and try and find what we love about the new version of them.
And let them keep growing.
Yeah, exactly. Not stifle them in that, and grow with each other, knowing that it might not be the same, you know, parallel path you used to have, but trying to find constantly what you appreciate about this new version of them.
Any tips for having difficult conversations? And I'm thinking specifically when you are probably quite sleep deprived because we're new parents here. So having to bring up something that's bothering you or something that's just not going too well in the relationship. Are there any tips that you have for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I could spend hours just talking about this, but I think the core of it is always starting from your own experience. No one likes to be blamed. No one likes to be told what they're doing wrong. No one likes to be made the problem. And so the more that we can come to any conversation from our own experience and, you know, using I statements. I mean, in counseling especially, we really beat this into the ground quite a lot, but it's true. Even if you're not using feelings, just starting the sentence with I think or I feel or I wasn't ready, you know, whatever.
Instead of saying you've done this,
yes,
or you haven't done this.
Exactly.
Right.
Starting from your own perspective, your own experience, rather than observing or, you know, talking about what your partner has done, will always start the conversation off on a better note. And it gives more room for your partner to empathize with you as well. If you come to them saying all the things they've done wrong, well, what are they going to do? They're going to be defensive, right?
Yeah,
they're going to need they're going to be on an attack. And so that's never going to start off a conversation on the right foot. Whereas if you share your experience, it leaves it more open for them to also share their own experience.
I think that's a really good tip. And talking of tips then, I want to run past you the tips that I give to my friends' partners.
All right.
So the main one is that during the postpartum phase, I mean, for the full first year, I would say, I tell the dads to ask to do things like going for a shower, ask to go to the gym. I keep using these two examples. You can tell they're personal examples. But as a mum, you have to often say, do you mind if I nip for a shower now? Or when shall I go to the gym? Or can I even do any of these? And I found myself constantly asking, or constantly planning to do things. So him just going and doing something really annoyed me.
Yeah.
So it kind of levels the playing field. They're probably just going to say yes.
Yeah.
Or they might say, actually, can you help me with this first? But just asking, for me, that's like my number one tip I tell all the dads.
I've never heard that tip, and I do like it. I think it's it kind of goes both ways as well. I kind of want to give that the opposite advice to the moms also. And that, the partners should not assume, and this goes back to kind of that freedom that dads often have, that women feel like they don't have. They shouldn't assume that they can just go and do whatever, right? It's always nice to like, is it a good time for me to go do this? Can I fit this in, whatever, having a conversation about it rather than assuming. And that's hard for a lot of men, but people in general, right? To have to ask kind of takes you back to your like teenage days. And most people don't want to go back to that time frame. So asking and checking in, making sure it works. And I'd also say with that for the moms to just not ask so much, to just do it.
Yeah, throw them in the deep end with the baby.
Because it goes both ways, right? And we shouldn't always have to feel like we need to ask for, a babysitter. That is our partner, and and that's a boundary I've really been working on personally in the last few years as well. Like just being like, I'm gonna go to the gym in an hour. Sometimes I'll say, does that work for you? But a lot of times just being a little bit more like a dad in those ways. I mean, obviously, ideally for both of us, we would ask and check in and whatever, but there's something liberating as well for a mom to just be like, I'm going to pop out for a little while. See you guys later.
Yeah.
And kind of taking some of that power back.
And a tip that Rich would give his friends, he said, was he expected it to be able to be more 50-50 than he actually could be. So as soon as Bonnie came out, I would say at least the first month, she just wanted me. Yeah. He thought he would be up doing the night feeds, all of that, and it just didn't work out that way. Yeah. So not through lack of trying. He would tell the dads that they need to focus, and I actually said this in the episode with Farah as well, that you need to focus on your wife at this phase and she can focus on the baby, obviously in varying amounts depending, but he found that quite a shock that he couldn't just do 50% of the work.
Yeah, I've had this conversation as well with friends and clients. I really think it should be more common knowledge that when you have a newborn baby, the mom is taking care of the baby primarily, and everyone else is taking care of the mom. And that's not going to, again, this is generalization and not going to work for every situation. But biologically, when a newborn being of any kind is born, they are wired to want and need their mother, right? So it's natural that the mom and baby feel most comfortable and most calm when they are able to attend to each other. Yeah. And because of that, the dads need to take care of the mom, and that's who, and you need taken care of after you have a baby, right? And I think that's shocking for people and hard for people, and can extend a lot longer than people expect as well, especially depending on the temperament of your child. My husband, I remember having the conversation where he was like, he knew to do that. He knew that the 4th trimester was about taking care of me while I took care of baby. And of course, he took care of baby as well, but a lot of it came down to me, especially if you're nursing. It just works out easier sometimes. But for him, what shocked him was after the fourth trimester was over, that he was still doing that. Because I had a child who, it sounds like it's kind of similar to mine, but it was very like koala baby, wanted me only. And my husband felt really rejected by that. I think he had this kind of, finish line where he was like, okay, at this time I get to be more hands-on with baby. And he was, but my daughter was actually not super about that. Yeah. She was like, no, like I still need more time to bond and to feel comfortable with mom. And that was really surprising to him. And so I really think even the first year, just understanding, especially with babies' different temperaments, mom is doing a lot automatically. Of course, if that's overwhelming or whatever, like sometimes that's not always how it goes, and that's fine as well. But for a lot of people, dad needs to be taking care of mom in the first year, and mom is taking care of baby. Yeah, so absolutely no dad expects that. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about in pregnancy as well, that a lot of dads are so excited that, once baby comes out, once baby is born, there is something palpable, hands-on that I can do.
Yeah.
Now is my time to shine.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is that dad feels quite rejected if baby doesn't want him. Or mom might not feel comfortable leaving for hours on end for dad to take care of baby. And we really need to be careful with that and understand that it's normal, because a lot of dads feel quite rejected by that and start being more hands off. And that lasts for way longer than it needs to.
Yeah.
And then dad is feeling rejected, is hands off, and not stepping up when it does become kind of his time to shine with baby.
Right. I think it comes down to another tip that I would say to the mums and the dads when they're pregnant, which is stay flexible. Because when you're pregnant, you're going to say, I'm going to pump because I want him to do the night feeds. Yeah. I definitely won't be co-sleeping. Yeah. I will discipline in this way. I totally knew exactly what parent I was going to be. Yeah. And then Bonnie came out and absolutely turned my world upside down and everything I thought I knew about parenting. So it's not that easy to do as a pregnant person, because you want to plan. You've got 9 months that you just want to buy all the best stuff and plan so much. But just stay flexible and open. I mean, I'm sure you can give a bit better tips than just stay flexible. How do people actually do that?
No, I think that is what it is. I think it's constantly planning for the best and what you're hoping for, but not having your expectations get in the way of your success. And that's for your relationship. That's for parenthood. That's for day to day with your children, right? And your family is you can hope for something and plan for something, but when we focus too much on our expectations and hold on to those expectations too tightly, we're really setting ourselves up for failure, because it'll never turn out exactly how we're hoping. Not in our relationship, not with our babies, with nothing in life, right? And so really being able to be more flexible and find the beauty in how your baby actually is, or how your relationship actually is, rather than the idea that you had of it, is going to prepare everyone, all of us in our personal and our professional, in life, really, to enjoy more of it. Because the expectations can really get the better of us, for sure. Yeah, and we have enough mum guilt as it is.
That's just all the mums feel the mum guilt, so you don't want to set yourself up for failure at all.
Yeah, if you're like, baby is not coming in the bed with me, absolutely not. I will not do that. Well, then if that doesn't quite work out, but then you're like, well, I've already said this is how I am. I've already decided this is the parent I am. Well, you're going to feel a lot of guilt when baby comes in the bed with you, right? It's okay to change your mind. It's okay, again, to grow and to evolve and to change.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about you. Let's get a bit more personal. I want to hear about your story to motherhood. Okay. Maybe how did you and your husband meet? And did you always want children?
Yeah, so my husband and I met in Virginia, in the U.S., and we were actually RAs together. Do you have RAs? Resident advisors in university.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we both were in charge of students in the residential halls.
Right, okay.
We were on the same staff. And so we had actually a forbidden romance, in which we had to then ask permission from our boss if we could date, because you're not supposed to just, hook up with people on staff just in case it doesn't go well. But here we are 13 years later. So I guess it went okay. And thankfully our boss said yes. And, and so my husband is a teacher, and obviously I'm a counselor. I was feeling a bit burnt out with counseling and just everything that kind of comes with that. And he really wanted, his dream was to teach abroad, and he wasn't doing it. So I said, okay, either you figure out this dream of yours, or I'm going to get a dog by the fall, because I wanted a dog. Well, a day or two later, he was signed up for a job fair. So I guess he really didn't want this dog. And we moved abroad to London. Again, no intentions of starting a family there. But we did always want a family. And that's just kind of, again, not holding on to too many expectations. That's kind of where our story brought us. And I worked a bit, but kind of ended up being a stay-at-home mother. which I'm really grateful for now, and just the benefits that you get, with maternity leave in the UK as well. I'm so grateful for. And so, yeah, I ended up with 2 kids there and kind of doing the stay-at-home mom thing, but also really wanted to get back into. I have spent so much time supporting my family, and that's a really important value to me. But I also wanted to start supporting other families as well. And that's kind of where this has led me, is that I'm still staying home part-time and then doing my coaching work part-time as well. So it's really the best of both worlds, where I can, have a happy home and also try and support happy homes also.
You said you were feeling quite burnt out at one point with the counselling. Is it quite hard not to take that kind of work home with you? And especially if you've got a young family is it quite stressful as a career?
Yeah. So, I never did kind of the in-home counseling once I became a mother. It was more so coaching. But I did do counseling in the schools, and it is. To be around people's pain and people's suffering, it's a lot. But do you know what? I actually find, and the more that I'm kind of taking on more work as the kids are getting older, I actually find it the opposite. People's stories and their challenges, it gives me the bigger picture. And I think that's what we all need in our personal lives on a day-to-day basis, whether that's going to the oceans or the mountains or whatever gives you kind of that big life perspective, really helps you get through the tough moments as well. So when I work with people, now I actually find it really motivating in my own family as well. Because I'm like, we're all going through this. We all have these challenges. We all have these stressors. We all have this kind of pain and suffering, even in our most personal relationships. I'm not the only one. My family's not the only one. I know this because I'm talking to other families who are going through similar things. And so it actually really uplifts me now to do this work, rather than kind of bringing me down and
that's really nice. That's such a positive way of looking at it as well. And it probably helps you take a step back, as we said before, having this space for your children to be whoever they want to be, because you see such a variety of different people with different problems. And so when they go through problems, it might not seem quite as catastrophic, maybe.
Absolutely. And, especially with my husband as well, the more that I have to professionally, and I'm such a great empathizer in the coaching room, in the counseling room, I can do that really well. I can take both sides. I can see where each person is coming from. And the more that I've had to take the side of the dad or the husband and his perspective, the more that's really helped me in my own relationship as well, because I can, a lot of these things that I'm saying about giving grace to your partner and having empathy for them and trying to see it from their side, I would not have said 5 years ago when I was pregnant.
Yeah.
I would have said, his job is easier. He's complaining, probably some expletive words in there. I wouldn't have said the same things, but just to be able to step back and empathize with another person that's going through something similar to my partner, I'm like, no, this really makes sense. And I can really see why this is an intense journey for everyone involved.
Yeah.
Having a family, having a partnership, it's intense.
But on a personal level, does he ever say, don't use that counselling or that coaching with me?
You know what? I have other family members and friends who have said that.
Yes. Oh, really? That's funny.
But my husband actually hasn't, but I can see it in his eyes sometimes. More so when it comes to parenting things. I'll be like, well, perhaps if you, and he's like, he gives me the look like, you're not the professional here,
yeah, you need to take a step back and not say anything.
Yeah, and then he'll be like, oh, on Instagram it said this is this. I'm like, yes, actually I posted about something
really,
very
darling?
similar 3 weeks ago. If you had read that, it was like, so he keeps me humbled and grounded in that way. Yeah.
Do you find specific expat problems as well? I know you've been doing this kind of work specifically in Dubai, so you can't really say it was different to the USA or UK, but are there problems that seem very expat?
Yeah, for sure. I think the whole part of being an expat, where so many of us are away from our natural support systems, adds a whole nother element to it, right? Like, we're not around grandparents. We're not around our friends from university or from high school. We're not in the same settings that we grew up in for most of us. And so we're in completely new territory. Like me trying to compare my childhood and how I was raised to how we're raising our children. It can't be compared in so many different ways. So we're on we're forging new territory, and it's it's confusing.
Yeah.
But I think that can be a benefit as well. I think that what I see with expats, and I know from my own journey as well, is that it can be hard to be away from family, and that's a challenging part about it, or just hard to be away from our own culture, right? But it also forces us to figure it out.
Yeah.
You can't just easily cut and run. You have to.
You don't just fall into the patterns that you've seen before, because you can't. They're not there. You need to actually make conscious decisions about how you're going to parent.
Absolutely. How you're going to parent, how your relationship is going to be. Family, most of our families love us a lot. And because of that, they like to give their input sometimes.
Yeah.
Which can be helpful and can also be very not helpful. To be away from the family dynamic that we grew up in can be a benefit in some ways, because we have the opportunity to kind of mold and shape how we want our family dynamic to be. And again, you have to figure it out with your partner. If it's just the two of you here and things aren't going well, it's much harder to just be like, let's call it quits.
Yeah.
Like you are your family, you're your unit here. And we got to figure out how this team is going to work, because we're miles away from everything else that we know.
Definitely. Well, I usually finish the podcast with 2 segments, with a mum lemma and some tips or recommendations.
All right.
So let's start with recommendations, actually, because I think it's quite specific to being an expat, but you've got some really accessible things, like you've got Cocoon, you've got a play group, and I want to bring them up at this point because a play group is something I haven't found yet in Dubai at all. So can you tell us a bit about all these different accessible ways we can be in contact with you?
Yeah, definitely. So I do a lot of different things, and a lot of people say, well, you're doing things with kids here and pregnant women here and couples there. But for me, I'm providing services for the family, for family unity, for family peace, and they all kind of fall underneath that, right? So my play group, Raising Wildflowers, that really came out of a need that I had, really solving my own problem in that when we first got to Dubai, I was staying home with my kids, 2 kids, and I didn't want to pay crazy prices for 2 kids when they were probably going to be fighting with each other half the time. And I just wanted something down to earth and accessible and just chill, where I could bring my kid, find like-minded people. And that's kind of what Raising Wildflowers is. We have a group it's coming up starting October 9th, 2 weeks from now. I think that's October 9th. And it's just a group of some moms, some nannies, about half and half right now, and just down to earth, casual time for the kids to be kids. We have story times, we sing songs, and it's all focused on kind of social emotional learning.
Okay.
So one of my toxic traits, my husband will say, is like buying books, but like primarily buying books about like feelings.
Okay.
And like being friends and that kind of fun stuff. So it kind of has that twist to it, the group. And so it's just a really nice, not like flashy time to connect with your child or have your nanny connect.
And it's mainly toddler sort of age group.
Yeah, but so some of the activities are more toddler geared, but everyone is welcome. And because we can all learn, like even the babies love watching the older kids play, right? So the group right now we already have a range from like 1 to 3.
Okay.
So my son will be there. I bring him along. And we have a fun time. He's going to be 3 on Thursday. So, I think he's probably one of the oldest. But we've had 4-year-olds before. We've had 9-month-old before. And it's just like, it's very community feeling.
Yeah.
I don't want to put restrictions on how many kids you have or, if a nanny comes or if the mom's coming or age, because there's something for everyone. And it really is to kind of, they don't need to do set tasks or have set developmental abilities. It's really
get out the house and connect.
Yeah, get out the house, be in nature, get some fresh air, and be around like-minded people.
Great. Okay. So that's number 1. Yeah. Your next solution is Cocoon. Tell me about Cocoon.
Yeah. So we started Cocoon in the spring of last year, and I'm working with the mom folk, with Bex on that. And it's really been lovely. Again, this is kind of like an accessible service for new moms, for seasoned moms. We've had moms come in that have just had a baby a couple weeks ago. And then we've also had moms come that are raising their fourth child, who's 3, right? So it's, again, a big range, but just talking about really relatable, really pressing motherhood topics that we don't always get a chance to talk about.
Okay. And do you get advice, or how does it work?
Yeah, so it's a couple of different things. So it's group coaching. So I'm there to provide professional support and guidance, and a lot
so
of
that
it
we
is,
don't just sit there and moan about our husbands.
Exactly. Although we do some of that as well. So there is that community aspect, right? So the moms are talking to each other, and I'm kind of guiding the conversation so that everyone has a chance to speak if they'd like to reflect. We do a lot of usually we get journals that the moms can write through, that you're doing some of your own personal reflection. So you're kind of thinking through some of these things and having a chance to chat about it with people, but also just taking the time to like reflect and have a moment of pause for yourself as well.
Yeah.
And the fantastic part about this is, again, you can bring your little ones with you. So around 18 months, but even up to 2 years and under, basically if they're too young to understand what we're talking about.
Okay.
Because we don't want them going home saying some of the things we're talking about. So basically, if they're too young to understand, we have childcare provided. So Sublime comes in and they have their wonderful ladies come in, and it's just really nice because there's toys there and they can hang out and kind of be with some other kids, or the moms can get a chance to not hold their babies for, sometimes I'm even there holding babies, and secretly I love that part of it. And just to be able to chat with other moms and have a chance to really talk about topics that are on your mind, whether that's a motherhood, relationships with other moms, right?
Yeah.
And how friendships change, or how your partner relationship has changed, or your self-confidence after having a baby. So all these topics that like you might talk about with your mom friends after you've kind of broken the ice, which we know takes like double the amount of time because we're having broken conversations, feeding babies, handling tantrums, whatever. So we just get right to the nitty gritty. You share as much or as little as you'd like, and you just really feel, a lot of people just feel really validated.
Yeah. You've really hit a nail on the head with those 2 things that we need, especially as expats here.
Yeah.
And I guess making friends as well as a mum, because I try and make friends in a play area, and then I've got to run off after Bonnie here. So many broken conversations.
Yeah.
But let's get on to $10 Tuesdays as well. What's this?
Yeah. So this is something I started just last month, actually. And this is some of the more important topics. So the last one was about relationships after kids, kind of the recipe to relationships. And it's an hour-long topic on a Tuesday. Next one's coming up in a few weeks as well, where we just hash out the basics of any topic. So I'm doing some parenting ones. I'm doing some partner relationships ones where it's just like, let me give you the information. We can chat about it for a reasonable price, and you can take what you need and leave the rest.
I would definitely think like experts aren't for me. I'm not going to be paying loads of money. I'm not in that bracket.
Yeah.
But actually you've got really accessible options. $10. I mean,
yeah,
most of us can afford $10 to get some expert advice.
Exactly. And it's, in the evenings. So maybe you are in the middle of putting babies to bed, you just pop headphones in, or you've just put them to bed and you can kind of cozy up on the couch or listen to it later. And it's just meant to be really accessible, easy information to kind of take in. And also for those people who are interested to kind of see what coaching is about or see what I'm about, just to see if any of it kind of hits home.
Yeah. Okay. And let's finish off with my mum lemma of the week. It seems silly to give you a mum lemma because we've literally spoken about all things mum lemma during this podcast. But I wanted to ask at what point someone should come to you for coaching, if they're going through issues, or should they just be coming to you for maintenance? When would you advise?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of all of the above.
Okay.
What I often find is that people come when they're in crisis and when they've really kind of hit their limit. But I would really say that anytime that you feel like you just feel out of your depth, that you're just not sure how to proceed, and that feeling comes up more than like once a week, then it's time. Because the worst that can happen is you do need just a little bit of maintenance to kind of get back on track, and you're good to go.
Yeah.
This doesn't need to be a years long thing.
Yeah.
But kind of the second that you even have the thought of like, I'm not sure what to do here, that's a great time to just, because even if it's just one session to kind of get your head on straight again, then that's great. And that we can work through that. It doesn't need to be, the nice thing about coaching is that it can be so flexible. Sometimes I work with people for months and months, and sometimes I work with people one time because they just have one kind of parenting thing that is, kind of eating at them, and they just want to kind of talk out loud about it a bit.
That's good to know that they're not then like tied in for months and months. They can just speak to you once if that's what they need.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so flexible, and really is just meant to, again, support families and individuals when they just need a little bit extra support, especially as expats. It's like you might just need an objective source to help you work through a problem.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be like you're in an emergency or everything is terrible or anything. It's just you need a little bit of objective support. And I think that's the number one thing with parents and in relationships, where we're supposed to know it all. We're supposed to figure it out on our own, and we're not supposed to have these problems.
Yeah.
But everyone does.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me, Leilani. Where can everyone find you?
Yes, thank you. I've had a really nice time. You can find me on Instagram at wildflower.family.coaching. And also my website, and that's wildflowerfamilycollective.com.
Perfect. I hope to come to both the cocoon and the playgroup, so I will see you there. For anyone else listening, if you want to support the show, then please do follow on your preferred podcast platform, and go and give me a follow on Instagram as well. So at nextofkin.ae. Thank you for listening. Have a good week. Thank you, Leilani.
Bye. Thank you.